following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Canna Chat in the Zone. I'm Ralph Tyko of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Many of my friends call me Zig. How are you doing, everybody? Got a good episode for you today. One of the causes that's near and dear to my heart. I am a veteran, and Ryan Miller helps veterans. He's going to tell you all about evac, and welcome to the airwaves, Ryan Miller.
Thank you so much, Ralph, and if you don't mind, I'll call you Zeke. But and thank you again
call me
for
Zig.
Okay, and thank you again for your support of our community and for your support of our country. Yes,
well,
I do support.
I was in the Air Force and did what I can to stay out of Vietnam is basically what I did, what I could to do, but mission accomplished, and I live to tell about it. Ryan, you're a veteran, and you were in the Marines. How did you come to start this organization to educate veterans on cannabis?
No, thank you for asking. That's a good question. It was basically while I was bud tending and serving in the clones department at Harborside Health Center in Oakland, where I was approached by the co-founder, Dave Weddingdress, if I'd be interested in starting a veteran support group. And I was, and we did, and we named it Harborside Heroes, and we operated there for monthly for 2.5 years. The first session that we had 7 troops show up, and the last session we had 33 troopers showed up. And then so after leaving Harborside in February of 2016, I, along with the co-founders of Oakland Extracts, Taryn Buxton and Aaron Tran, created Operation EVAC, educating veterans about cannabis.
Beautiful. Now, are you working towards your nonprofit?
Absolutely. The application is almost complete. I've got it back from our accountants, and so just kind of working all through that documentation. But absolutely, the goal is the 501c3 nonprofit. Absolutely.
That makes everything worthwhile in terms of people who donate. They can get to write off their donation. And as a matter of fact, you can, at this point, accept donations in contemplation of your 501c3, so that if you can get them, if you can get the 501c3, if you're on your way, that if people gave you money today, they could write it off as if you had the 501c3.
Absolutely.
Like to make people aware of that in case they want to give to this great cause. Where can they reach you to donate? And then we'll talk about just how do you educate the veterans, and you can tell stories of how your organization has helped individuals. We all want to hear about this because, as you're well aware of, and our audience may not be, the veterans' benefits that that veterans are entitled to oftentimes has to be fought for, and their injuries are being denied. Their mental injuries are being denied. It's taken a long time for certain veterans to even be acknowledged that if they had Agent Orange, the veterans would be responsible for covering it. So they've gone through hell, and they've helped make this country what it is. So let's do everything we can to help them. How can your donation, the audience's donation, reach you?
Thank you for asking. And our email address is ryan@opevac.org. You can also check out our website. It's www.opevac.org. Fundraising would be generous, and it would definitely help programming and help us organize and advocate for a better climate here in 2018. You're right that, the VA system has, had a lot of opportunities for improvement in terms of how we take care of our troopers. And it's also, I think, important to acknowledge that they have come a long way from, what the services that we've been used to experiencing. And I think it's also important to mention that, yes, while the VA does get a lot of bad, press out there, there also is a lot of troopers that are very thankful for the quality of care that they're receiving at the VA. For me, myself, my mental health service is, benefited tremendously from the care that I'm receiving at the Oakland VA. So yes, there's definitely some opportunities for improvement, and that's why organizations like Operation EVAC exist to help, fill those gaps that aren't necessarily within the VA's, capacity.
I guess my point is that what makes organizations like yours have to exist is kind of sad. You would think. If you can afford to go to war, you should be able to afford to take care of the veterans. Glad, thank God, organizations like yours exist. I just wanted to put a little onus on the government itself for letting us all down. I'm not just talking about the veterans, because by letting the veterans down, you're letting society down. And I can attest to this because of the percentage of homelessness, how many veterans are homeless these days. It's
isn't that ironic?
Right. The
right.
people that went
defend
out
the
there.
homeland. Exactly.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Really unbelievable. Let's try to put this on an up note. Rather than identify what's wrong, let's identify what you're doing to try to help. Say I was a veteran and in shock from the war, as my grandmother used to say, and I came to your organization for the first time. What would I expect to find in a typical meeting, and how would I be made to feel welcome and comfortable?
These are really good questions, man. Thank you. So we provide 16 recurring peer-led social support groups at dispensaries throughout the Northern California every month. The format of the session is the first hour is a guided discussion where we sit in a circle, and I'll come up with a topic of the day, and we'll go around and we'll share our stories. And this is also, it's an exercise in public speaking, which is both a social and employable skill. And it's also an exercise in forming positive narratives about our experiences and avoiding the veteran as victim mentality. After the discussion, prior to January 1st, I would distribute complimentary cannabis products that I collect from a very generous philanthropic cannabis community, and then I redistribute those free of charge to local veterans. And then I have the bud tender background.
Nice.
With the bud tender background, I educate them about the safe consumption practices of these products. So after the guided
and you remind them, of course, that driving under the influence of marijuana can, like driving under the influence of anything, distractions, being tired, having alcohol affect you, speed, this, that, or the other thing, it's bad. Leave your party at home. That's the number one thing that makes this newly legalized, gives this newly legalized industry a bad name in folks' mind. That, hey, is this going to contribute to the mayhem on the freeways? It really isn't if folks will start to realize that they need to leave their party at home and not take advantage
right.
steps that we've made to legalize it. Because I'm an old guy. I'm an old smoker from way back. Smoker and a toker. Never thought this would happen. 40 years of doing this just to get marijuana looked at as something that isn't evil, isn't reefer madness type stuff.
No, I'm glad that you. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. And there is a lot of alarmist concern around driving while consuming cannabis. And yes, substances can certainly affect your perceptions. And I think that what's important with Prop 64 and all this new awareness that's arriving is the research that's going to go into determining if cannabis is an impairment to driving. I recall there was a study in Colorado by the National Transportation Safety Board that attributed no additional hazards to cannabis while driving. And
I
for those
agree
of
with
us,
that. There is none, and as a matter of fact, it makes you a safer, more cautious driver.
Exactly.
Personal experience. But I'm talking about people who are out there combining it with other intoxicating substances. The combination.
Now you're hitting something. Absolutely. And that's what I'm concerned.
It's the combination. And the combination could be that you're high and just tired, or unusually distracted, or rushed, or whatever it is that you got going, picking up kids, this, that, and the other thing.
Sure.
That's when being high becomes a problem. Not when you're just driving along, being safe. It's fine to do that.
Because, a lot of us that are consumer commuters, I'll say, we attribute better driving, right? Like traffic's not a problem as long as you got a joint with you. Anxiety is reduced. Road rage, I can imagine, also reduced. So,
it's hard to load an automatic weapon when you're high.
Or even want to, right? Like.
Oh well, right.
We'll get into that more.
Well, if you're in traffic, you got to want to at one time or another during the day.
Right.
But I know we're kidding about that. But yes, even want to. That's the mindset that many veterans have to adjust to when they come back. Is that the violence need not be anymore, and that's a blessing, and that's something that cannabis can certainly help with.
No, you're absolutely
right.
Let me just finish up the description of the OP-EVAC program, because it's definitely relevant to what you mentioned in terms of avoiding violence, right? Veterans are trained to be viciously violent without hesitation. And our goal is to enable the veteran to invite them to leave that lifestyle behind. And the way that we begin that is with nonviolent communication, the way that we communicate with others, the way that we communicate in terms of our own stories. And then just something else that strengthens the resiliency portion is the mindfulness practice. So like I said, it's a 90-minute session. The first hour is guided discussion. Then for about 10 minutes, we would distribute complimentary cannabis and educate about the safe consumption. And then it's an invitation to a 20-minute guided meditation. It's called iRest Yoga Nidra. It's delivered by a remarkable healer named Jane Leonard, and they're using this methodology at VAs all over the country. So it's a full kind of experience in the human emotion.
Now, is there on-site consumption in your meetings, or you tell them how to consume after the meeting is over?
Right. But no, it's a good question. We don't necessarily, endorse, or it's not necessarily part of the agenda to consume during meetings. However, this is freedom, and the veteran
when in Rome,
right? And if the veteran needs to consume a vape or consume a tincture to maintain the presence in the circle, then I'm certainly not going to interrupt that, as long as it complies with dispensary.
Okay, would you indulge me and my oft-times ignorant audience, not stupid but ignorant about cannabis, because a lot of folks are from all over the world, not just in Northern California, where basically Oaksterdam in Oakland, California, is the start of it, the start of all the education here. The word gets out slowly, so there are some expressions that I'd like you to fill the folks in on who are just learning about cannabis. You say vape. Now, I know what a vape is. You know what a vape is.
Right.
What's the audience? How is that different than a vape cigarette?
Right.
You know, what's going on with vape, and what are tinctures?
Sure. Well, good question. Vaping, vaporization, is emerging as a preferred consumption method because you avoid a lot of times the toxins that you ingest through combustion, like the carbon. So vaporization is emerging as a more preferred method of consumption. Sabo Shen and the Vape Exhale company has generously donated a couple of their units to our cause, and then vape pens, right? These batteries with the oil cartridges attached are a great way for discreet consumption while you're out and about. For that instant
now,
relief.
The smell coming out of them does not smell like marijuana.
It may smell some like herb. However, it's more of a vapor, so it doesn't really linger like smoke tends to. So it evaporates a lot more readily. And then you mentioned tinctures, and tinctures are one of the oldest forms of medicine. And so tinctures are most often a way to extract cannabis, the chemical compounds from cannabis. Alcohol is most frequently used, vegetable glycerin, also other solvents.
Let me also make note to the audience that there are cannabis products that are healing and that can contain little or no THC. So one can consume the product, get the benefits of healing, and not get high if that's what they're into, not change your consciousness. So it isn't just a puff pass industry anymore where everybody gets buzzed, and this is, which isn't a bad thing, by the way, but it's come much further than that, and I appreciate your helping educate the folk. How about that?
Thank you. And it's important to educate, I think, because what we're really asking folks to do is unlearn what they've been familiar with over decades of intentional misinformation and propaganda, like the DARE program.
With that in mind, I will ask you, what unintentional or intentional bit of propaganda must you fight on a regular basis? What is the biggest misconception of the public about marijuana? About weed,
Thank you
cannabis?
so much for asking. And I loved watching Cheech and Chong growing up, and the whole.
I liked the first movie, but the second, everything after that made marijuana smoking just a big joke, and
exactly. Right? And
after a while, it just wasn't funny. But yet they went a long way. But what are the misconceptions?
Well, right. And I think what the media and Hollywood has done is create this perception of the lazy, sedentary, pot-smoking stoner. And what we hope to do with veterans and what folks are doing, like the Canna Athlete Project and Jim McAlpine and the 420 Games, is changing this perception that cannabis leads to a lazy, sedentary lifestyle, when in fact it really helps a lot of folks achieve high achieving levels of success in society. For me, I use it as an athletic performance enhancer. It's a bronchodilator, expands the air sacs in your lungs, reduces the activity and sensitivity of your pain receptors, enhances focus. It's the best anti-inflammatory ever. So it really makes sense in terms of athletic enhancement. So Just
well,
basically,
you know who pioneered that in my thinking was a fellow by the name of Robert Parrish, who was a center with the Boston Celtics. And the year he got caught with a pound of weed, which was quite a bit in those days, he played the most minutes of anybody in the NBA. And he used it as, he was the first to come out with the idea that weed could be used as, you say, an athletic performance enhancer. And so you're absolutely right on that point. It opens your air sacs. It makes you. It's a wonderful herb.
Right. And I think Americans, we have this tendency to deflect ownership of our lives and our behaviors. Right. And so just put that in a little context. We believe that the herb helps you be who you really are. Right. Helps you remove your mask and just, be your authentic self. So if you're a lazy, sedentary, unmotivated person, then you're going to be a lazy, sedentary, unmotivated person that smokes pot, right? But if you're a high achiever,
which came first, the chicken or the egg? You weren't smoking pot before you became lazy. You smoked pot after. You enhanced the laziness, perhaps.
Sure.
Just like people enhance their ability to perceive things, to create, to paint, to sculpt.
Absolutely. Exactly right.
You don't become a sculptor before you become a sculptor on pot. You don't become a pot person. You're the sculptor first, in other words.
Right. And if you're a high-achieving, creative, active person, then the same thing is going to happen while you're consuming cannabis, even more so perhaps. So a lot of people deflect their own personal responsibility on external substances, and I think that's irresponsible.
Okay, that said, where do people run into problems with pot? People, smokers, what's a way to avoid abuse? How do you know when you've had too much? How is it controlled?
Well, this is a good question. I think the biggest problem, especially for military veterans in California, is how to afford this substance. Opiates are free at the VA, antidepressants are free at the VA, and cannabis, in contrast, is very expensive. So the affordability of cannabis is a primary concern for veterans that I serve. And with this new regulatory model, it's now illegal to distribute complementary cannabis unlicensed in the state of California. So that's probably the biggest concern. And, in terms of using too much, that's kind of tough for me to necessarily quantify. I'll have to...
Maybe because using too much is kind of an oxymoron. You might.
Well, if we're talking about cancer prevention and cancer treatment, then arguably we should be saturating our bodies in these substances.
As I have for all these years, and I contribute that to my remaining healthy. And that doesn't mean tomorrow won't be another day. But I have, by all practical measurement, abused the drug beyond belief over the years. And it's gotten me to the point where I'm alive and healthy and couldn't be happier.
I mean, cannabis may be habit forming, but so is brushing your teeth. So is going to the gym, right? There's a lot of positive habits that we all benefit more from.
Habits can be great. But, one thing, cannabis is not physically habit forming. So these veterans who are having trouble buying it and are out of it, they're not going to go rob an old lady for her welfare money because they're physically addicted to cannabis. It's a big difference than mental addiction and a physical addiction. Am I correct?
No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
What is it? Because we're running a little short on time, and I want you to get out your thoughts. What is it that you would tell a congressman in Iowa about legalizing pot?
That's a really good question. And essentially, I would say if they're serious about the opiate overdose epidemic, if they're serious about the veteran suicide epidemic, then they have to take cannabis seriously. And if they're failing to take cannabis seriously, then essentially they're failing to care enough about those aforementioned phenomenons in our country. And so it is, the trooper that's living in Iowa, right, they're watching the news and they're learning about what's going on in Colorado and Washington, California, in states all over the country, right? And what they're doing now is they're picking up and they're leaving, right? They're leaving their communities, they're leaving their networks, they're leaving their churches and their families to come to California, to often live in their cars to have access to this plant, right? And so shouldn't we as veterans have the same identical access to safe, therapeutic care in every state? Shouldn't we as veterans, have the ability to choose what substances we put into our bodies in terms of healing? And also, shouldn't every hometown community benefit from retaining their returning warriors and to serve on their fire departments and to serve on their city councils? And please don't serve the police departments, but that's another story.
Right.
Shouldn't every hometown benefit from retaining their returning warriors instead of the brain drain that's happening now? Because all these veterans, they're leaving their communities and they're coming here to heal, and we're grateful to receive them. However, I'd like to advocate, for safe access for veterans in all states, and then ultimately safe access for veterans, safe access for active duty troops. That's the long term.
Beautiful. And I will answer the number one objection that I hear for veterans benefits. Didn't these veterans enlist on their own volition? And I say no. It was an economic draft that got them in. It was
Absolutely
involuntary, just as if it were a draft. So that I don't want to. Pardon me?
No, that's exactly right. We don't have a draft in America anymore, but what we have with the college tuition rates and what the employment rates are, we have a socioeconomic draft, and it's kids with limited access to resources. They see the military, essentially violent servitude, as their only way for upward social mobility, their only hope. And so what's important to remember, especially when we're drafting these equity policies, is that the school-to-prison pipeline and the military intersect in the same low-income communities, right? So those of us that were privileged enough to avoid prison are often funneled into the military-industrial complex, right? And so you're absolutely right. Until there's less of a classful society in America, until there's more of a shared sacrifice in terms of our national defense, you're right. There's always going to be enlistment of lower socioeconomic communities.
Okay, Ryan, we've covered a lot of ground. I hope you'll come back and we can keep in touch. You could let us know about how your organization is coming along and be a regular contributor to Canna Chat in the Zone. I'd appreciate that immensely, Ryan. This has been terrific.
Thank you so much for including me, sir, and welcome home. And I'm excited to help shape this landscape with you moving forward. So thank you so much.
Beautiful. Be well, everybody. Come back next week. It's Canna Chat in the Zone. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. The guest is Ryan Miller, and he will be back. He's terrific. Adios. See you next time. Happy trails.
Nope.